Welcome everybody to this staff forum. For those of you who don't know me or I haven't met you yet, my name is Lisa Dunlop and I am the interim Chief Executive until Shelley Dolan starts the end of September. Hopefully a few of you got to meet Shelley when she was out here the last week of June, and I noticed that her photo was one of the ones that was scrolling through. And I'm sure, she will certainly be out and about meeting people in the first few weeks and months, in particular of her arrival, which will come around very quickly. So what the plan for today's forum is a bit of a business update. We won't dwell too much on the figures and things. Talk to you a little bit. I mean, there were some photos scrolling through. We had a very exciting afternoon yesterday at Government House as part of the 70th birthday celebrations. Helen Havenia is going to talk to you about the People Matter survey. And this year we've been extremely fortunate. For those of you who've been in the industry for a while, often we don't get the results for many, many months afterwards, but this year we've been really fortunate and that they've come through really quickly. So we can give you a bit of a preview of what information we have to date. We're going to meet our new Executive Director of Business Ventures. Many of you will already know Dominic Wall with his previous hat on, but we'll find out a little bit about Dominic. And also I'd like to, and I'm just looking and I can't see them here, but to let you know there are a couple of other members of the team. Mark Shepherd started as the Interim Chief Executive Officer, Chief Operating Officer, sorry. Maybe he could have this. No. He started this is his end of his second week, and he will be with us until Nicole returns in February next year. And he has certainly hit the ground running, so hopefully you'll get an opportunity to meet and see him on the rounds. And of course, David Lee, who many of you will know, again with his previous role within pathology, has commenced as the Director of Strategy. So a good opportunity to sort of talk about where we are in terms of the business. We are in the middle of putting together the 1920 budget, which you would expect at this time of the year. We've got, I've got a slide coming up, but the good news is that we actually finished with a small surplus for 18-19, so that was exciting. We said we literally slid over the plate, which was a great achievement. But we do certainly have challenges in the 1920 budget. You possibly have seen, there's been some media articles. The good or the bad news is that the whole health sector are in the same boat. So it's, it is a common thread, but we also will need to think carefully about how we're spending the money. It's not, I want to reassure people, this is not a cost-cutting exercise. Sometimes you'll be surprised what rumours get up to the 11th floor, but that is certainly one of the rumours that is around. It is not about cutting services, people, slashing and burning. Yes, we have a challenge. Yes, we have a challenge every year. This year's a little bit harder, but it is a good opportunity for us to think about how we're working and how we can work differently. And I would encourage you guys to think, and you will know far more than we do about the things that frustrate you, that you think are waste in the system or duplicated in the system, or if we did this a little bit differently, we would save, heaps of time and money. So they're the sorts of opportunities that we're looking at. With all strategies, we're looking at revenue optimisation. So we already know that there's work we're doing. We want to make sure we're getting paid for it. And, you don't have to be a finance officer to know that that's the best thing to do. We know we're working hard, and you'll see some stats that the activity has grown. We've heard in the People Matter survey that people are saying we're being stretched with the volume and demand. So we're very conscious of that. It's about how can we work smarter and to continue the focus on delivering world's best cancer care to our patients. So whether you're in the frontline service or whether you're in a back of house support role, all of us need to work together to ensure that Peter Mac remains sustainable and that we can focus our attention in what we're all here for, and that's providing the best patient care. So you will hear over the next coming weeks, we're setting up a project. It's been called the Super Project. You may or may not like the name, we might tweak the name, but the emphasis is on looking at the things we do across a number of streams to try and bridge this budget shortfall that we're currently doing. I also want to reassure you that we're in the department lobbying for more money as well. So I think a lot of times I hear and have heard over the years about, well, just go into the department and ask them for more money. We are doing that. So I do want to reassure you all that we're not just saying we have to, find money. We are also in there asking for money and for recognition of the work that we are currently doing. We've been relatively successful to date. Last year we were able to get $7 million from the department in recognition that it costs more to work and operate in this building than it did at East Melbourne. And the fact that we were able to deliver, a budget on budget is incredibly important. If you're a health service that finished in a deficit and or continues to be in a deficit and hasn't demonstrated that you're looking in your own patch, I can assure you that your bids for support and funding from the department go to the bottom of the list. So Peter Mac is in a really good position. Over a couple of years, there's been a lot of good work to show and demonstrate to the department that we are trying to keep our own house in order. And again, I can't emphasise the importance of that. You cannot keep going cap in hand to the department. They very quickly get sick of you. And we probably all know of health services that have done that. It's not a successful strategy for the long term. It's a good opportunity to sort of celebrate some of the good things that we have been able to do that have made a difference to patients in particular and to ease the burden of the clinical staff. And one of those is the implementation of the patient navigator role, which was a major focus in 2018. And not only has it provided a single point of contact for patients, but it's freed up times for clinicians to do what we want them to be doing rather than to doing some of the administrative tasks. So again, those are the sorts of opportunities that we're looking to you for suggestions on how we can improve care. That didn't cost any more money, but has an enormous benefit to patients and frees up time for clinical staff, which in turn allows them to do what they're meant to be doing in a timely manner. The other exciting thing which has happened in the last month is the Royal Melbourne went live in the emergency department of the EMR. So we were all holding our breath. None of us got a call at 2 o'clock in the morning to say that the world was coming to an end, and it went incredibly smoothly. So that puts all of us in good stead and gives us comfort for stage 2, which, if it's not in your diaries, May 2, 2020 is go live for the rest of the precinct. That will obviously be the main focus for all of us, but from now until May. It's less than 12 months now. That clock is ticking away. I have described it as we're on the bullet train, and we just need to keep up. It is exciting, it is going to be wonderful, but it also is going to require some focus and work. And I've actually just this morning We've been talking about the training requirements and how we're going to manage that and what it looks like. And there'll be some more information coming out in regards to that, but depending on what you do and where you work, there will be varying degrees of training that is required, but there is training required, and we will need to think very carefully about what we take on, because the EMR is the single biggest strategic project for the next 12 months. And if you think you haven't had much to do with it up to date, that isn't going to last. We're all going to have to focus and work on it. It's not just an electronic record. It is going to require system changes, process changes of how we work. And so it is a big thing. But it's also a very, very exciting opportunity. The other learnings that we had from the Royal Melbourne in terms of that is planning, and that the planning isn't just at executive or director level, it actually has to be local level planning. You're the experts of the areas that you work in, and so you will need to work out what is going to work best for you. So again, I've just come from a meeting around, how much leave should we let people have at any given time? I'm not going to dictate that. It's back to, these are the requirements. These people will need to do this sort of training. You know what you can spare and what you can't spare, and when you can spare them and when you can't. So it is, important that every area looks at what it means to them and to their staff, and you are best placed to make the decisions around what works for you and your team. So that's coming some too. The other thing is to note that the EMR is not going to be 100% on day one, and we know that. And so what we also need to ensure is that when we do go live, that there are mechanisms in place to solve problems quickly. And again, that's another big learning from the Melbourne. They set up a response team. It was 24 hours a day. I've seen pictures of their table full of Tim Tams and lollies to sustain them. But that team actually was able to be disbanded a bit earlier than they had anticipated, which is great. But there will be, a need to make quick responses because, if you're on the cold face and something's not working, we need to be able to get to you with a solution in a very timely manner. So more on the EMR, every staff forum, and there are lots and lots of communications will come your way. I'll encourage you, if you haven't already, register for the newsletter, and so you can keep up to date with where things are at. So I won't bore you too much with the financial summary, except to reinforce that we came in with a $247,000 surplus, which is great. And you can sort of read the rest of it. We were fortunate in that some of the hospital running costs, so the HSA, we finished in a deficit, but we were supported by some of the other funds. So just because you feel you're busy, we know you're busy, and so here's some data just to show that year on year, no surprise that the surgical admissions have increased. So acknowledging and recognising that, that is absolutely true, and that with that we're also increasing our elective surgery waiting list, which is problematic. And we will need to think carefully about how we do that. So we're working harder. We've done more than what we've ever done before, but they're still coming in the door and the waiting list is growing. So, that's sort of a tension that we'll need to focus on. And just a little bit of some graphs there around the revenue streams. So you'll recall that we get WEIS for inpatient activity, you get WACE for outpatient activity, and we get WOWS from radiotherapy. And so you can see there that there's been growth in all of those areas predominantly. and that has continued. So on to some exciting things. As we've said, this year Peter Mac turned 70. There was a cocktail party for major donors and people who had been associated with the hospital in June. And that was a great opportunity for previous leaders and key stakeholders to come and group together and reminisce. And yesterday's event was around celebrating our patients. So there are about 200 patients that came and their carers or support person or family member. And the Governor, Linda DeSalle, very generously opened up Government House and hosted an afternoon tea for all of us. And I was just sort of commenting to a couple of people, the patients that, were able to attend, they were generally thrilled and excited to be part of it, which was great. And there were people from on track through to some quite elderly people. So we had a cross-section. And I certainly spoke to a couple of patients who had told me that they had been coming to Peter Mac for 20 and 30 years. So, that's phenomenal. So now I'm going to hand over to Helen, and she's just going to talk to you a little bit and announce the winners of the People Matter survey.
Hello. Great to be able to talk about the results with the People Matter survey. I know that you're probably really sick of receiving emails from us encouraging you to take part, and for those who had already, they'd be hearing it over and over again. But in the end, we had some fantastic results, and it's certainly one of the best participation rates, in fact, the best participation rate we've ever had. And I think so far we've looked at a whole lot of other hospitals, and the completion rate of 67% is the highest in the state. So well done to all of the participants in the Peter Mac survey. And I think what's really critical about that is why it's so important is that we respond to the feedback. When we talk about efficiency of the work we do, the cost pressures we have, and ensuring that we have value in everything we do, what we don't want to do is introduce interventions or activities that we think are addressing the issues people have and find that we're actually targeting the wrong things. So when we have a 67% participation rate, we know that this is really valid data that's coming to us. You're giving us very genuine feedback, and the changes we make will genuinely have an impact on the departments and teams and across the organisation that we know they need to have, and we're not sort of wasting your time with programs that are not going to add value. So thank you. I can't tell you how happy we were with that result. Having said that, of course, having my own standards at pretty high, 75% was the participation rate we wanted, so we didn't quite make it, but maybe next year we'll see how we go and see if we can blitz it even more so we get even more valued feedback. We are working on analysing the results. I can't tell you how many spreadsheets we have that have been sent from the VPSC with all sorts of different cuts and permutations and combinations. Excel spreadsheets are not great fun when you're in people and culture, I reckon, but we are sorting through the data, and we'll have it by department, we'll have it by different demographics, we'll have it by craft group, so that we can really do some deeper analysis and understand, as I said, the targeted programs we need to undertake. We do want to ensure that there are custom action plans, not just a broad brush approach. Having said that, however, we are looking at our current people plan, which was developed based on last year's 2018 People Matter survey results. The 4 pillars of that plan continue to remain as culture, leadership, well-being and people systems. We understand that those 4 areas are the ones that have resonated for people as areas that needed some attention and some improvement. We'll continue to work on the programs we've had. We can't necessarily make a difference within sort of a 9-month program, and we'll review the current plan based on the new feedback and see if what we're doing is hitting the mark and making some progress, and readapt and adjust for organisation-wide initiatives we'll undertake. So that's what's happening org-wide, but certainly at the department levels, we'll be breaking up this data, providing that to your leaders and you as teams so that you can review your own personalised information and understand what targeted actions you will undertake. Again, knowing that you're being very busy or productive, I would suggest that you might just want to come up with one or two that will really hit the mark, just as we're aiming to across the organisation as well. There are some prizes. We talked about that when we announced that we were undertaking, of course, the People Matter survey, and we tried with the data we have and the current people systems that we feel are a bit limiting on sort of numbers and craft groups and people that are in different groups. But we looked at different groups. There were some that exceeded 100%, so more than their team filled in the survey but said they're in a different team, so not sure what happened there. But the first prize is awarded to the division with the highest participation rate, and I'll be announcing that in just a moment. The second prize is awarded to the units with the highest participation rate, and the third will be by the clinical craft groups as well. The winners are research came first with a survey participation rate of an outstanding 78%. So well done, research. That was awesome, and you're the one huge group that actually exceeded the target of the 75% as well. So it's a great pleasure to be able to award the first prize to research. The second prize, we couldn't divide them, so we've just decided to share it, and that is Allied Health, Australian Cancer Survivorship Centre, Wellbeing and the Volunteers, Health Information, and then On Track as well, and each of them achieved that almost 100%, so that was just an outstanding effort. So well done to them, I think that's fantastic. And the third group is the nursing group with survey participation rate of 56%. For such a large population of Peter Mac, to achieve a 56% participation rate is fantastic. We'll be aiming for more next year, but that's great. And a special mention to senior medical staff, who we were really pleasantly surprised to see a participation rate of 50% of. But again, we'll be working on them pretty hard next year and seeing what we can do because they are in contention for those prizes. Just a couple of slides on some of the results that we have, and we will do a comprehensive analysis and share that with you at next month's All-Staff Forum as well. The top 5 most improved, the reference to good communication about psychological safety issues that affect me, gone up by 14%, which is fantastic. But to see it still at 50% is not enough, and we know that we've got a lot of work to do. I'd suggest that one of the things that has contributed to that is the care program that's being undertaken across the nursing group at the moment, which is really about helping them work through psychological safety and compassion fatigue in particular. And it's an outstanding program that we do expect to expand across the organisation. We will be working with research and the medical staff to try and see where we can introduce that program for them as well. Being kept well informed throughout the change process. Interesting that there's such a change focus in these points, and the improvements that have gone up, sort of 8%, 10%, and 9% in change is quite an interesting one. It may be because there's sort of the hangover from 2016 to 18 that then this year seeing the EMR work that's being undertaken and the amount of communication has been a good improvement. However, the percentages themselves seem quite low. And then the senior leaders provide clear strategy and direction. It's a good increase there as well. And, I'm really glad to hear that. I think that we as senior leaders need to ensure that there is clear strategy and direction. But again, 66% to me is also a bit too low. We've got a bit of work to do in that space. On the 5 most deteriorated, I think these are quite telling and for some quite concerning as well. All levels of my organisation are involved in the prevention of stress. There's only 39% of employees who agree that that is the case, and it's the reason that in our people plan, of course, we'll continue to work on the wellbeing of staff and seeing what we can do to ensure that it's seen as an org-wide issue that we need to address at all levels of the organisation. I think that's a very telling piece of feedback. And my organisation does not tolerate improper conduct. It concerns me to know that there are 29% of employees 31% of employees who actually agree that we tolerate improper conduct. I think we need to make a stand and be seen to be making a stand in this particular space. And if there is improper conduct, we do need to know about it. We do need to take action, and we need to be seen to be taking action as well. Certainly, I don't want to be a part of an organisation where we tolerate improper conduct, and we need to make a stand on that. So if you know of anything, do let us know. We will formally address it. The next one, my organisation encourages employees to act in ways that are consistent with human rights. It's a reduction of 7%. It's 83%, so it's pretty clear that we do. But, obviously the communication of the work we do in this space is not high. Positive culture within my organisation to employees who have caring responsibilities. Also sad to see a reduction in this. 74% is not too bad, but the reality is seeing a reduction in this space is really concerning, and we will be doing everything we can to address this. One of those will be the work that we're going to be doing on flexible work and the policy on flexible work, and our gender equity strategy being undertaken as well. So we'll be looking in that space. And then I enjoy the work in my current job. Sad to see it go down 6%. Great to see it's 80%, but sad to see it go down 6%. So we've got some work to do in that space. We have been looking through the many detailed pieces of feedback where there were verbatim words written, and your feedback is quite interesting. To start with, we've done this sort of word cloud to show what it is that you're all talking about in the verbatim comments. And the words, I don't know if you've seen many word clouds, but the words that are the biggest are the ones that were mentioned the most. And we can see that patients, caring, care, work, research are ones that are quite significant, and of course staff. So that's what it's great to be working about. But the areas that need some improvement, again, we've got the reference to staff as the number one. And I don't think that means that staff need to be improved, because I know we've got awesome staff. But it really, there are some opportunities for good improvement in quite a few different areas. So we are going to be grouping all of those by theme to see what sort of the percentages of feedback are in these spaces. And again, we'll do a deeper analysis on that next year. Interesting, hey? So what's next for you? We are working through the organisational results over the next few weeks. We'll see what trends are emerging. If there are things that are organisational wide, we'll see whether our programs do address them, and if they don't, we'll create programs that do. It will help us identify, what additional support is needed, and of course make sure that we set up the meetings working with managers who should own these results with their teams to come up with some responses to the teams. We will meet with those individual teams, happy to partner with leaders for that leader to do their own analysis of those results, for the leader to run a meeting with you, go through those results and then agree on some actions as well. And as mentioned, we'll do that comprehensive presentation. Did anyone have any questions on People Matter survey? Yeah.
The statistic about the human right, going down, do you know how that would relate to the voluntary assisted dying act being introduced at Peter Mac?
Do you think that might be a link?
I know it's been released, I think, specifically the keyword human right, given the protest that we've had there, I'd be interested to see how people's perception and staff's perception at Peter Mac about the act being introduced.
It's a really good connection. That's really helpful for us. Yeah, it's a good point. We'll have a look through the verbatim comments and see if something comes up there that kind of highlights, what it is, if there's something related to VAD and human rights as well. Yeah, good point. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? No? Thank you very much. I'll hand over. Ta.
So maybe since you raised it, I'll probably give people a bit of an update on VAD. So it is just over 1 month since the legislation went live. I think it would be fair to summarise in that we had underestimated, both within Peter Mac and because we accommodate the care navigators across the state, the number of patients and family members who were waiting for the legislation to go live. So we anticipated a bit of a peak, but it was a larger peak than we had anticipated. That in itself has caused some challenges in that at a time when the clinicians in particular are signing up, for want of a better word, to participate and do the training and be registered is on a sort of a slow incline. There was the opposite happening with patients going, we need something. We've been waiting for, often many months. How come I can't get somebody right now? So there have been some challenges in that, particularly for rural patients, which I guess is not unexpected. There is not the volume of clinicians, full stop, but particularly specialists who are willing to participate or have done the appropriate training. We've had some feedback around also there was a perception from the clinical staff that if I go online this afternoon, I can do my training, get my certificate, and away I go. And it's not that quick, and that you actually have to register to get onto the portal. They need to check that you are who you say you are and that you really are an accredited, medical practitioner. You need to do the training, and then there is another sort of, 24, 48-hour lag before you actually get your, licence to go, so to speak. So some of the, the work that the care navigators are doing in particular in conjunction with the department is to try and reset some expectations about this isn't at the moment something that patients can access instantly, and that there is a bit of a delay, which can be several weeks, and the challenge in finding clinicians in particular in rural regions. The other sort of group is actually patients with neurodegenerative conditions have been the particularly challenging cohort of patients. The other just a little sidetrack which has made us look at a different model of care is, of course, we've been advised that the federal criminal code doesn't allow you to use telephone, internet, fax or telemedicine in particular to discuss the specifics of VAD as it's perceived or could be perceived as assisting suicide, which is, of course, a federal offence. So that has, proven to be a bit challenging, but we are working through all those issues. I'll just also, for my sins, don't email me about the car park. We all know, I too have had to wait an hour and a half to get out of the car park. We are constantly onto Vic roads. I would encourage you to, and I know people are themselves, ring Vic roads. It's not something Peter Mac can solve. We have written, we have done it as an organisation, as individuals. I know people are ringing, and in fact I heard someone say that Vic roads are actually saying stop ringing us, just do it online. So they need to get the message. We are pushing to see the whites of their eyes on site. They do assure me that they have readjusted the light sequence at the roundabout. Now, did they or didn't they? I don't know. I've had a couple of days where I've thought something really weird's happening and I've got from B6 out and not seen another car. But then the next day it will be incredibly challenging, and it doesn't seem to be necessarily a rhyme or reason to it. If there are traffic delays elsewhere in Melbourne or it's raining, you're going to have trouble getting out of our car park. So as much as you can, stagger your start and finishing times. We acknowledge there's a problem. The Metro Tunnel works around all of Melbourne are contributing to increased traffic congestion. The other thing I'll flag, which is different to anything that we would previously consider, is that normally you'd say school holidays is a breeze because everyone's on holidays and the traffic's less. It's worse because that's the time that the various construction projects ramp up, whether they be for trams, trains or major roads. And in fact, it's been worse because it's forcing people to use public transport more, or not they can't use public transport. We're on the thing. Eventually, when the metro tunnel is up and running, we'll be laughing, but that's still a couple of years away. So I would now like to introduce you to our new Executive Director of Business Ventures, Dominic Wall. So many of you will know Dominic, perhaps with his previous hat on, but what we thought we might do is explain to you what does an Executive Director of Business Ventures mean and do, because clearly it's a different role to that of what Ziggy had in her portfolio. So, Dominic, what is it you think you're doing here?
So one of the strategic pillars for Peter Mac is to find ventures and alternate sources of revenue to support its research and clinical program at Peter Mac. We recognise that government funding is finite, and for the past 20 years, before I had an exec role, but leading up to where I am now, working with the Peter Mac, and particularly with Siggy in recent years, we've been developing business ventures that will support the services here and provide an alternative source of revenue. Hospitals are hard places to grow businesses in because they're obviously working with constrained resources, working within a tight budget, whilst businesses have to grow. And it is an experiment which I think is starting to prove out. And Peter Mac corporatised a business in 2003, which was cell therapies. It's been hard because Peter Mac isn't a venture capitalist. It doesn't have big pools of capital to start up these businesses. So we refer to it as being bootstrap finance, living on the smell of an oily rag with a little bit of help from Peter Mac. But it is delivering services. And the proof of the pudding has been that, as we know, a few months ago, we had the investment from the federal government of $80 million to establish a national centre for cellular immunotherapy, a centre of excellence in cellular immunotherapy. And it has helped place Peter Mac in the environment and in a position in Australia where it is seen as the premier place to conduct this new era of human therapy. We are one of a handful of sites in the world that is offering gene-modified cells to patients with cancer. These treatments are changing patient outcomes, they're changing lives, they work, and they're extraordinarily technically difficult to deliver, and we've had to work with lots of stakeholders. I've had lots of support from the organisation. So that's just one example, and we have to do more. We've got an exercise I've been working with David Lee with pathology and exomics, and we'll be hearing about David in a moment. But we are hoping to find other opportunities within Peter Mac where we can find ways and new business models to deliver these services to Peter Mac and to our patients, but in a way that doesn't result in us asking cap in hand again from the department. So I'm trying to grow these businesses, protect them, defend them, establish them, nurture them, and at the same time also retain a certain amount of oversight of pathology, which will continue to operate in the background.
Thank you, Dominic. And I learnt yesterday that Dominic was not born in Australia, and actually he's got a very interesting and long family history. So I might ask you to elaborate.
So I fly under a false flag. I have an Alsace English accent, and some people tease me mercilessly, especially my children, with my slightly pompous English voice. But as it happens, I'm a fake person in that regard because my first language is French. I was born in Northern Europe. My family have lived in the same part of Northern Europe since the 15th century, from families of hop growers. We have a family reunion each year in a small town called West-Vleteren in Flanders, where we donated lands to a Trappist monastery. And in our honour, each year the family gathers first Tuesday in October to celebrate with one of the only 5 remaining accredited Trappist breweries. So I sound like an Englishman, English transplant to Australia, but I actually have probably more of a continental background. But I can fake it quite well.
So any question anyone's got around hops, you know where to come. So thank you and welcome to the Executive Committee. Because I noticed that since I introduced people and they have now arrived, so perhaps if I ask David Lee, if you stand up and wave. David, as I mentioned earlier, is the new Director of Strategy, and Mark Shepherd. So Mark, as I mentioned earlier, is the new Chief Operating Officer. So we've now actually got an opportunity to throw it open to you. A lot of the executive team are here as well, so feel free to ask us any questions, or if you, more importantly, usually and interestingly, if there are any rumours floating around there, let's hear them and we can confirm or deny, or go and seek more information if we have no idea. Sure.
Quite no exciting rumours, but Dominic, I wondered if you could just briefly give us a few dot points on the kind of patients that cell therapies are actually treating now. I don't know if we've done our first CAR T. You know, we heard so much about it coming, but.
So we are in the process, I think, of treating our 8th government-funded patient for CAR T. Interestingly, the funding is only for patients with B-cell leukemia, and we have been surprised by how many patients have wanted to come to Peter Mac to be treated. It turns out that the other states aren't ready. Peter Mac is pretty well the only treatment centre that's able to offer adult and young adolescent treatments for patients with B-cell leukemia. So we're seeing a lot of interstate patients coming to Peter Mac. But that's really just the vanguard, the lead. We are running 11 clinical trials in mantle cell lymphoma, follicular lymphoma, various forms of diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, and closely behind are trials in myeloma. And we are also running, I think, probably the world's first trial of CRISPR gene-edited allo CAR T cells for patients with myeloma. And closely behind, we're pursuing 11 other trials involving things like gene-modified T-cell receptors for patients with synovial sarcoma, which is technology that came out of Baylor and Adaptimmune. So there's a wave of activity coming this way, but yes, we are seeing quite a few government-funded patients coming through. We are also doing the world's first gene therapy for metabolic disorders at Royal Melbourne. And so we've been assisting a number of families where the children are affected by Fabry disease and hopefully very shortly Gaucher's disease, where we're correcting the gene defect in their bone marrow. And these children are able to, and young adults are able to go off enzyme replacement therapy and epochal stuff. And Peter Mac's there, so I'm very proud to be here to do that.
And there'll be a small quiz before you're allowed to leave on the indications of CAR T therapy, so I hope you are all taking notes. Any other questions?
I think everybody is so excited about it, and we should be keeping that news in all of the newsletters about, because it's happening here right now.
We're very proud about it, and we're dealing with the intricacies of other philanthropic groups sometimes celebrating outcomes, maybe in a way that isn't necessarily the most appropriate way. So we are trying to find a way to communicate these wonderful news, because obviously with trials we're very sensitive about how we communicate participation in trials in a way that protects patients' privacy and so forth. I do believe there'll be some press this weekend involving a patient that we've been peripherally involved with, but it is a sensitive topic. We definitely do want to celebrate it. It's just very challenging to find exactly the right way to do it, where we protect patients' privacy, and also we're very careful about endorsing a particular company's technology. So you're right, we should, we must. We're still trying to find the right way to do it.
Any other questions for anybody? No? Right. Oh, Helen, yes.
Could
we do a quick intro of Mark?
We can in a minute, yes.
Without notice, Mark?
Sure. Can I also plug the flu vaccine? I did send an email out to everybody yesterday, but it's not too late. The flu is still rampant, and there are. I think it was only last week in the newspaper. There are people who have died of influenza. So encourage people, if you haven't had your flu vaccine, to make contact with the infection prevention team. It's not too late. We still have it available, and it's still timely to do it. So, Mark, would you like to? Have you got any secrets in your past that you'd like to share?
I don't think my life would be as quite as interesting as Dominic's background. Anyway, maybe my life is interesting. Number one, thank you very much, and I'll get you back later, Helen, for putting me on the spot. But no, I appreciate it, and
David, David's done a rapid retreat in case you've asked him.
And can someone take that microphone off, Helen, in case she gets dangerous? No, it looks fantastic and wonderful opportunity to come here to Peter Mac and work, particularly as the Chief Operating Officer. Big part of the organisation and, really great opportunity. Most of my career has been in Sydney, Australia's sporting capital. No, sorry, I'm joking. But most of my career has been in Sydney, and my last job for about 5 years there was a director and deputy chief executive of South Eastern Sydney Local Health District. So it's across 5 hospitals, which is Prince Wales, St George, the Royal Hospital for Women, large sort of well-known organisation. So, I was very pleased to have spent my time there and got a lot of groundwork done in changing that organisation, and looking forward to working with the team here to improve things. I've got a nursing background. Originally, I was a nurse for about 18 years, and I've been in sort of general management and organisation sort of director and executive director roles for about 18 years as well, despite the fact I'm looking so young. And I look forward to a lot of the things that need to be done here to make the organisation a better place to work in, and more effective in how we help you to do the great work that you're doing. I think I see my role as an executive to help the organisation to thrive. So it's about myself being accountable to you. And the way I say that here is to hold me to account for that. So I think that's really important. I've got a strong background in analytics as well, and improvement methods, or improvement science, one could call it. And I think if you can measure something, you can improve it. And those sorts of concepts flow through almost everything we do in health. So I look forward to working with you and getting some of those methods into our business as usual. Just helps us have a way of going about our business. That's probably enough about me. And thank you very much for the 5 minutes being put on the spot.
And I guess very importantly, Mark, have you an AFL team?
Of course, the Swans.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Move on.
Just remember they were South Melbourne at some point. So, and throw money, not rocks or stones. Yeah, so thank you.
So if there are no more questions, we'll see you all next month, and have a good weekend.